applications openly and then see what our applicant pool for screening committee members looks like, and then put together the screening committee based on the applicant pool. My other thought, and then I don't have to monopolize the conversation, was that it would be good to have the same question if we were to, for example, at our next meeting or at a later meeting, to all interview the candidates as the last select board who hired a town manager did. If we all interview the candidates collectively as a board, that we would ask each applicant the same set of questions. So there may be, maybe we would designate someone to come up with the questions, or maybe we would all come with a question to have consistent questions for all applicants.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Carlo, did I see your hand raised?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Thanks, Anne. I have a few, I guess, well, one concern, 5, I think might be too small. I was going to suggest 7 to 9, 9 being the highest point, but 5, I'm worried about quorum issues. And I was on the impression that time is of the essence. And I like with all the command meetings that took place, I mean, in my head before this meeting, I thought Chief Clark would be an automatic. Sharon would be an automatic as an advisory, not a voting. Chief Burns would be an automatic. I don't know where Chief Burns lives. So people like that were going to be in my thinking process. 2 of us, I agree with that. I read Ivria's letter and comments, so we can have that discussion. But on the initial conversation here, or the beginning of this conversation, I think 5 is too small for the quorum reason. I know that would make it more efficient, and we could have many advisors. Superintendent being one of them. Again, he was an automatic for me. People that Bob works with the most. Jean is not a resident. If Jean is not going to apply, I would like her to be part of the process. Laura Gem, because she's been displaced, I don't know where she is right now, but she's still considered a resident. So these are key people from this huge endeavor that we're going to take on. So I'll stop there and let any others speak. Thank you.
Anne?
So just wanted to remind folks that the scope of work contemplates that the consultant would meet with all department heads as part of the process. So there will be an opportunity for all department heads to have a role in the process. We can certainly enhance that by appointing 1 or more department heads to the screening committee, but there is an automatic way to include them as part of the process in the scope of work we've outlined.
Right, thank you. That'd be at arm's length, but I know what you mean. Yeah, I don't just. You're right. That would be great, obviously.
Mark.
Thanks, Karen. Do we have a little bit more background, and maybe Karen, you've done the homework, or maybe Ivria can share in terms of the composition that other communities have chosen, and specifically the question of kind of this department head, town staff participation on the committee with their residents? I guess that's a real question that I have.
I think well, Ivria, why don't you go first? I'm sure you have some input. Thank you.
I did a little bit of looking, and Reading's charter provision regarding residents is pretty unique. And so I did see other communities having certain department heads on the steering committee or screening committee itself. Like Carlo mentioned, it is pretty common to see either police or fire chiefs sitting on the committee, as well as the school superintendent. But it really does vary. Some select boards want to have more control over the process, and you see smaller screening committees. But I'd say in general, department heads in some form are represented on a screening committee, whether it's multiple department heads or one department head that represents all of the department heads, and then someone from police and fire.
Okay, and I saw there is a great variety across Massachusetts. I have seen it work both ways, where designated department head positions, roles, kind of the way Reading did it in 2013, and also committees of all residents. When I spoke to one of their select board members last night, they decided they didn't want any select board representation on the screening committee. They wanted to be hands off. So that's all different approaches. And so, and as I noted in the packet information, so the James Conrier, the former police chief, was on the committee at that time. He was the senior public safety officer. You know, if we wanted to replicate something like that, Chief Burns would be the senior public safety officer. But I did, in doing the research about what happened in 2013, he was representing department heads there. He was not specifically representing public safety. He was representing department heads. And then, you know, having a voice from the schools was the superintendent's role.
Ivy has a hand up.
As does Chris.
There it is. Oh, okay, good. I'll see every Chris, I just looked, I didn't see you, but we'll get you next.
Sorry, just wanted to make one quick comment based off of Anne's suggestion that the ethics law does preclude municipal officials from holding multiple roles. So it's easier for the select board to appoint someone to the committee if they're serving ex officio than it is for the select board to appoint them to serve. So for example, Jean, if she was to apply and be appointed as an individual in the community, it could raise potentially ethics issues. So it'd be better if she served in her role ex officio. So just something to consider as you're thinking through the composition.
Would that not apply to individuals who are on boards? Like if we were to have a select board member, a school committee member, a library board of trustee member, would we need to serve ex officio?
That's easier because they're volunteer paid positions, but when you're talking about a municipal official that's paid in their current role, it's easier to appoint them ex officio.
Okay. Thank you, Ivrea.
Great. Chris?
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I agree with Carlo. I think 5 is too little. 7, I would say, sounds about right to me. I know the school committee had 16, which I can't even fathom 16 people being on a committee like that. That's just, but the end result, I think worked out for them. And for the select board, are we gonna, like, how are we appointing the people for that? Is it just gonna be the 2 VASC members from before, or we have to vote again, or do we know what process will be for that?
So if you, sure. Oh, is somebody raising their hand? Okay, so, you know, we had a process that worked in 2013, worked quite well. Town manager lasted for 7 years. And you can see in the notes that at that time, the chair and the vice chair were on the screening committee, which again is a small part of the whole process. So I would like to propose that we continue in that line of tradition, but you know, having served for a number of months with this board, you know, I believe we are fully committed to open, transparent, and want to be actively involved. So we cannot have, we have to be cognizant of open meeting law and best practices. In the MMA presentation talked about the need for executive sessions for just the initial screening. Hopefully as well, when we meet our consultants, we can talk about the importance of recruiting, and they could potentially do some pre-screening for us based on other communities' experience. So then the screening community the screening committee would then have a very concerted effort. But it could potentially take, according to the folks I spoke to, when I'm, about 4 meetings. 1 meeting to elect a chair and outline the process, another meeting or 2 of insignificant length to interview or screen the initial screening, and then make recommendations to the select board. The select board would then take it from there. It's ultimately the select board's decision. So this is for a number of really good purposes that the structure was set up in the first place. And I would like to propose that we continue it. Anne?
Thanks, Karen. It certainly is a decision for the board as a whole to make. I would be very interested in serving on the screening committee. Karen and I have done a fair amount of initial work together with IRIA to get the ball rolling on this process, and would be happy to run with the ball there. That being said, I think I'm comfortable speaking for myself, and I suspect that Karen feels the same, that we would want to involve the full board at every stage of the process where it's possible to do so. We know that we have a very engaged and committed select board. So, at every stage that we can bring information back to the full board, we would seek to do so, and to provide regular updates to the full board, to seek input from the full board at every possible occasion, with the exception of, the personal information of the applicants who come forward in the initial screening process.
You're muted, Karen.
Chris?
Thanks, Karen. I think from where I stand on this, I respectfully no disservice to Karen and Anne, but I think not having Mark as part of one of the board members on the selection committee when he participated before, for me, doesn't make sense, and more of from an optics standpoint, as much as everyone would like to believe one way or another, the optics from residents in the town, if it was compromised one way, I think would, I don't know how to put it correctly, politely, whatever the scenario is, I just don't think the optics of it would be the town would agree with me. But I just think no matter what, Mark should be one of the members. I mean, he served on it before, he's done hiring, etc. Like, for me, that's where I stand.
Oh, Carlo?
Thanks, Karen. I agree 100% with Chris. Not only do I think Mark should be on it, I like the VASC model. I know Chris is trying to be polite as far as optics, but I think we need to have good representation of the board, and that balance of Mark and myself would give that balance. So I'm hoping the board would understand that and consider that. I have hired, not at this level by any means, but hundreds and hundreds of employees over the years in various capacities. And given Mark's experience and his high involvement with the command center, even if he wasn't on the prior committee, I would be supporting Mark for this. Just his involvement during COVID and with the command center. And I pulled up some of the minutes from some of the command meetings. And I already had the idea before I did that about definitely including participation of certain members of town staff. But Mark was an integral part of COVID, of the command meetings, and as our chair at that time. So I would employ the board to support Mark and myself as on the screening committee to represent the board. Thank you.
Hi, I see Mark's hand up.
Thanks, Karen. So a number of thoughts. One, I'm pretty comfortable whatever structure the board wants in terms of who the 2 members should be. I think that we can all serve that way. I think that from my perspective, we learned a very important lesson in the police chief search in terms of not just the openness, but the issue of the feedback loop and gathering input in advance and then sharing kind of throughout the process. So it's not I appreciate it's executive session to protect the names of the candidates, but we need a way that the board can be very, very involved, kind of all members. And that's not an easy task, but it needs to happen. I think that's really important. I also think that we do need at least a member of staff to join the search committee or selection committee or whatever we're going to call it. I think that the issue of kind of who is going to be working both with them and kind of who they'd be working for, I think that that's an important element here. I had thought that perhaps even the library director would be a really good person to be on the committee, in particular because the library director doesn't report to the town manager, but works very closely with the town manager. I was thinking about how the committee was set up before. And I'm not quite sure how we did the school superintendent last time because he wasn't a resident, but I get it, that's okay. Jackie Carson was involved as kind of an active community member, but also as a constituent in the system, kind of working very closely with town government in terms of what was going on. So I think in there having a member of staff that probably is reporting to the town manager is an interesting idea. I think the library director could be an interesting idea. And then I also think that this notion, I think 7 is the number not to go above. I really think we just want to make it very manageable and to make it likely that we can get people to come to meetings. The goal is to get everybody whenever possible. And I think you want to have 5 just feels a drop tight and more than 7 feels unwieldy to me. So those are, sorry, lots of different comments.
Oh, good. Those are good. Thank you, Mark. Anne?
Back to the question of the number, for those who are advocating for 7, would that include ex officio members in the makeup?
Karen, me personally, it'd be 7 voting members. That's the way I was thinking of it. I'm open to what you guys have, but I think, quorum being an issue, like Mark said, we have a busy several months, the 5 of us and FinCom and the town. The 7 number, 9, yeah, maybe too many, but 7 official voting members. And to add to Mark's comment, if Amy were so chosen or asked and she said yes, to me, to have Chief Clark not be part of that would be a shame as a resident and the chief of police and a longtime resident. So I'm okay with 2 staff, and if we're going to have 7, maybe someone in the building too, Matt Cornelis or some, we can. I don't want to go on forever on this, but I'm okay with the application part of it too. But I think we should pick the 5 of us. When it comes to brass tacks, I think we should pick the 7, and then maybe have the outside 3 or whatever apply. But again, this is a work in progress. So I've never done this before, but I like the 7 to be voting, to answer your question.
You'd like the 7 to be voting, so that would mean like on top of the 7 voting members, we would have department heads.
Yes and no, whatever the board agrees. I think as them as advisory roles and coming to maybe some of the meetings, not all of the meetings, but to be involved, yes, 16 was a crazy number. I don't know how they pull that off. But we have to keep in mind that there could be some conflicts. And to get those meetings in, and some of them are going to be long. Some homework will be done in advance, but again, that's just my voice. 7 voting and 3. I'm just throwing a number. 3 non-voting. I'm just throwing that as a number out. It could be 0 if you guys say so. It's thanks.
To the challenge of meeting a quorum, I think from the from the seminar, it seemed like the best practice is not to try to make sure we get a quorum, but to get all screening committee members present for all of the meetings. Which was part of the, the rationale for recommending a smaller committee. So if all town staff and department heads would have to be ex officio, then I'm wondering if the 7 would include ex officio members. So we could have, five voting, but then in excess of that to include department heads. I mean, maybe not all of them, that would probably become unwieldy, but
Yeah, I don't think all of them, you're right.
yeah.
Okay, you know what, Chris or Carlo, I would like you to, before I say that, let me say, so our library director is a Reading resident. I do believe our chief safety officer, Chief Burns, is a resident, so they don't have a problem with that residency requirement. But I'd like one or both of you to clarify your concerns about optics.
Chris, you want to go first?
Sure.
Chris.
Thanks, Karen. I'm not sure which way to put this politely or not. I believe the vast selection committee with Mark and Carlo both being on it satisfied both parts of town, whichever scenario you want to go around. And to not have both members on it that would satisfy both parts of town, I think is just a massive misstep. And we can ignore the fact that that exists, but it exists. The last election was 52 to 48%. I mean, that's as split as you come in between numbers. So that's the optics that I have. I'm bowing out of the conversation because I'm the last one here and all of you have more experience than I do. I just think that not doing it that way just seems, I don't know, I don't agree with it, but I'm just one of 5 people.
Carlo?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is a nonpartisan decision, but clearly a lot of our votes are partisan, and that's just the way it is. Politics is politics. So I don't want this to be political, but I don't want it to get political. And I think if we have a representation by myself and Mark, then no one can say it is political. And I'll just leave it at that.
That we were elected to represent all of the citizens of Reading. This is a nonpartisan board. And so this argument has no weight here. So I think we should stick to the fact that we are here. We were elected by all the residents of Reading to do the best in our power to make the right decisions for Reading. And I would agree with what somebody said earlier, that this could be the most important thing we do. For that reason, I am not going to be in support of delegating to the VASC.
Chris has his hand raised, Karen.
Thank you, Ann. Chris?
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I know that all 5 of us are completely objective in the entire process, as board members as well as residents, except the fact still remains that the town is the way that the town is. I don't see how we can just ignore that fact.
I'm going to need to stop you right there. You are repeating things that you have already said. Do you have new information that the board should know about?
But I was just responding to your comment about
I haven't heard
everyone
anything new that you haven't already said.
Well, I'll just put it this way. It's par for the course at this point. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Karen. A couple of questions, just to clarify first. So, Ann, are you suggesting that there would be 5 voting members, it'd be 2 select board members and 3 residents that are not town officials? And then we'd add to that one or two staff members in an ex officio role, meaning that they're not voting members, but they are part of the discussions of the committee? Is that the structure you're proposing?
Yes, and I just wanted to clarify with Ivrea, if we did that, can we have non-resident staff serve in an ex officio capacity on the committee, or would we have to involve them in some other creative fashion?
So the issue only arises if they're appointed to the committee as voting members. If all you're doing is seeking the advice and input of particular staff members, then that is okay. That gets assumed in their job duties. It's when you're officially appointing them to serve on an additional public body. That's when the issue arises. So for those staff members that are also residents, if the board wanted to appoint them to serve as a voting member on the committee, you would appoint them as department head of community development, whatever you want to call it for sake of argument, shall serve as a voting member. And then they're serving ex officio because of their status as the department head. If they were to leave their position, they would no longer be a member of the screening committee. That's how you would have to do it if you wanted a department head who is a resident to serve as a voting member.
Thank you, Ivrea.
Thoughts from other board members on the structure that Mark and Ann just elaborated on? Sorry. Carlo, thank you.
Oh, thanks. Can I ask a question? Ann, so let's say it's you and Karen, and are you saying, when you say residents, I know what you mean, but are you saying it could be John and Jane Doe from the community, and because those are the applications? Or are you saying that, we pick a finance committee member and we pick, someone from conservation, let's say? Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying just 3 random people?
Well, I think we could open it up broadly, but I think we would probably all do some recruiting among involved individuals in town. I did ask Ivrea actually in advance of today's meeting whether we can have a finance committee member serve, given that the charter restrictions around finance committee members serving on any other committee in town. It looks like we could, so long as it's appointed as an ad hoc committee, or it's structured as an ad hoc committee, and or a finance committee member would serve ex officio, because there are charter restrictions on members. But it is certainly something in mind. We have a lot of qualified, involved finance committee members, certainly, who I would hope would consider applying. But we'd have to think about how we would structure that kind of appointment.
So I'm just trying to picture this, that we open this up to applicants and we get, many different backgrounds of employment, people who have not worked, people who are small business owners. And then we're sifting through those. And then we pick from a pool of whatever, 20, 30, 50. And then what if we all don't agree on that?
Well, we would need a majority of the board to vote to appoint however many people we have designated to form the committee.
Right, and that's where it can get a little sticky, in my opinion. I mean,
Sure.
we saw,
We may not be unanimous.
right, and
It's
I
gonna
think,
come in regardless.
I think we need to be unanimous on almost every aspect of this, honestly. I get where this is going with the chair and vice chair, I get it, but every vote should be 5-0, pretty much, until the very end, in my opinion. So I just don't want to open up a can of worms here and start playing politics. I really don't. I'm not saying that's anyone's intention, but if we start taking applicants, look at the VAST process that we went through recently. So, and that was just for the VAST. This is for our town manager. So I don't think we need to have a resident, not saying not to have them on as a voting member, but I think that should be an appointment that's a 5-0 vote, not let's open it up and have a meeting to have a meeting about who we pick. and then it becomes a circus. And it's not 5-0. It's just not a good look for us. Thanks.
Ian?
Certainly in an ideal scenario, we have a 5-0 appointment, but that's not always possible. We are 5 individuals with 5 different viewpoints. Certainly I've always been committed to a consensus building process to the extent possible. I think in this particular situation, it is arguably the most important task that has come before the board since I have been elected to the board. It's one I take extremely seriously, as well as my responsibility to represent all of the residents of Reading. I also, would point everyone to the precedent of the chair and vice chair serving in the past. I have in the past, sort of allowed other members to take on particular responsibilities, in the interest of consensus building. I feel very strongly about working diligently to my maximum ability in this process to ensure a good process, to ensure information being delivered to both the board and the community throughout. I helped to draft the scope of work for the consultants such that there would be meetings with department heads, select board members, screening committee members at the outset, as well as a community listening session prior to the establishment of the ideal candidate profile. It is I'm very committed to a strong community process here. And it's my commitment is such that in this particular situation, given the gravity and seriousness of the responsibility, I would like to be involved and at the table. Thanks.
Chris?
Thanks, Karen. I think no matter what the number that we have, we just have to stress the importance. If somebody is applying, that they have to anticipate that they have to work with our schedule, I would say, because if we do have 30, 50 applicants, whatever the number ends up being, it just has to be stressed that, how important of a search this is, that people have to work with, this schedule, not their own. Like, obviously, we're all here at noon during the work. It's just an important part of the process. So I would encourage anyone and everyone to apply, but just know that if there's 12 meetings in a row, that's an hour each, or whatever random thing that comes up, it should be expected that they're making it there. This is only the one time of year, maybe, until 10 years from now, who knows, that it's going to happen again. So I just like to stress the point of whoever it is, that they know that making the meetings is going to be of utmost concern. So thanks.
Thank you, Chris. You know what? I think it's really important to keep the committee as tight as possible. And this is, again, just the resume screening committee. There are a lot of other things that we as a board will be doing. The consultants will help us build a profile, which in talking to other select board, like Wenham and previous town manager screening committees, the profile is critical. So how you build your profile, that's something we can work on and improve together. That is going to drive the kind of candidates, having the professional consulting firm, we've already decided to do that. That will help us recruit the best candidates. As far as the applicants for this screening committee, Chris, you make an excellent point. My understanding is this is going to be a couple of really intense days. As long as when we actively open this up to the applicants, we need to be really clear. Non-attendance is not an option, and it's going to be a commitment. They need, if they work, they may need to take time off. Anne has committed to do that. I am independently employed. I can commit to do that to make sure this happens. And so to some extent, I think our applicant pool will understand if we make that clear, and those folks with hopefully lots of involvement and length of time and an understanding of what the Reading community is would apply. I can't see not having large resident voice on this profile. That notwithstanding, the statement of work is absolutely critical to have focus groups, including staff and another focus groups of residents. And Carlo, getting back to something that you said, 5-0 votes. We don't always have 5-0 votes, but I can tell you another precedent in what happened in the last town meeting hiring process. There was a split vote on the final candidates. 3 candidates were presented. There was a split vote. Majority of the board makes the final decision. And in the spirit of what's in the best interest of the town and the residents and the businesses, the other select board members, they took a second vote, and that was unanimous. So, that might be something that we should consider doing, but realistically, time is of the essence, and we have got to make decisions, and that's why we were elected. So I know this task can seem overwhelming, but we are going to get a great guide to help us work this out. And that's another thing I should probably bring up, that select board members, we may need more meetings to get this done, to have the involvement that I hear that you want. So you need to be committed to be able to do that. It's so that for some respects, that is why having a screening committee that comes back with finalists for the select board to do in-depth interviews with makes a lot of sense. May I ask the select board if you would allow Alan Folds to speak for a moment? He has some thoughts on why a moderator would make an excellent member of this screening committee. Does anybody have any objections? Okay, I don't see any. Okay, Alan?
You're muted,
There
Alan.
we go. All right, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I just want to make a pitch for the position of the moderator to be on this committee. The town manager does have a lot of interaction, especially obviously at town meeting time. And I think it would be a good idea for that branch of government, legislative branch, to be represented. In addition to that, I can point out myself, I've been around all through Bob's tenure and a big chunk of Peter's. So I've seen both of our town managers. So I think I have the background as well, but it's really more the position I'm pushing for. Position, and somebody, again, who does deal with the manager a lot.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mark?
Thanks, Karen. And thanks, Alan. I think it's a great idea to include the moderator. As I saw you in the corner, I wasn't sure if you were going to make the pitch, but in kind of thinking through who some potential candidates are who are already very engaged in town government in particular, I think that the town moderator is a great person to consider for that. So I'm wondering if I'm still a little bit unclear on this, the ex officio kind of roles and whether they vote or not. But let me just kind of throw a straw person out for a second. What if there were 2 select board members, town moderator, a representative of staff, who I think probably is somewhere in the public safety arena, so either Chief Clark or Chief Burns, library director, and 2 residents. Would that meet kind of our needs here in terms of desired size, in terms of the coverage we're looking for, and the ability to, as Karen said, to screen? We're just trying to do a screen here, right? So hopefully we have lots and lots of people that want to apply. We need to screen it down to something more reasonable. So who are the right people to be involved in that screen? I'm wondering if that sounds like a reasonable way to think about a committee here.
Karen,
Sure, Carla, go ahead.
thanks. Can I ask Alan a quick question? Can I ask Alan a quick question?
Oh, yes, sir. Go ahead.
Alan, thanks. I agree with you, all the comments you made. Are you advocating for a voting position or just to be part of the process?
Well, really to be part of the process, I think ideally it would be a voting position, but either way would work. I think the voice needs to be there.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to ask you directly so the other board members know, and
Sure.
I agree. So I think what Mark stated, you know, if we're gonna pick on 7, which sounds like we're all kind of going in that direction. You know, whether Alan's part of the 7 or the 5, I don't know what direction we're going. Maybe we should pick that direction first, I guess. I know Karen mentioned 5, and Mark and I were kind of on the 7 route. So I don't know what we're gonna pick.
Thanks, Carlo. I can say that I have seen at least one other community, a town moderator was included on the screening committee.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that. I don't know if we should start with how many are gonna be on the screening committee and then start talking a little bit more.
I think it would be a good idea to make some motions. Ivrea, feel free to jump in. You know, I'd be okay with the committee makeup as Mark just laid it out. So so everybody's a resident, so we meet that requirement. We do have residents who are not necessarily staff members. We have department heads. Do we need to, the only choice would be which public safety officer, and as again, the precedent was the senior public safety officer. So personally, I'd vote for Chief Burns. He was also appointed to be the leader of command. So, you know, a couple of you mentioned how important it was, you know, and how well that process worked. So, anyway, so I would entertain a motion for a committee makeup the way Mark has described it, if someone would like to make that.
I'm happy to make the motion. Anne had her hand up. I didn't, if you want to recognize her first or not.
Sure.
I just was trying to get some clarity on Mark's proposal, but if you make the motion, that would probably make it a little clearer.
Okay, so why don't I make a motion to create a search committee, a town manager search committee comprised of 7 members that would include 2 select board members, town moderator, 2 residents who would be selected through a process that the select board will define, and an application. And I'm going to suggest 2 members of one as in public safety and the other is the library director. And I'm fine with it being, you know, Chief Burns on seniority and command, if that makes sense. I'm fine with that. So sorry, so I kind of made a motion and then added comment to it.
So I could second that motion, and then we can have discussion. So consider it second. Question for Ivrea, just for clarification, the staff members that we're talking about inviting to be on this committee, they need to be ex officio, or they can be full voting members?
So ex officio just means that they serve because they fill this other role. So the select board members that would be appointed to this committee would be serving ex officio. If you are no longer a select board member, you would no longer be on this search committee. So the library representative and the public safety representative, the moderator, and the select board members are all serving ex officio on the screening committee because they are only serving by nature of having that other role. So it doesn't tie to voting at all. It just ties to the ability to serve.
Okay, other comments, Anne?
But in reality, Ivrea, of the individuals mentioned, only the library director and the public safety department head would not be able to vote by virtue of ethical restrictions.
So the library director is she a resident?
Mm-hmm.
So she could vote, she could be a voting member. The ethics issue is that she could only serve on this committee if she's serving ex officio, which she is, because you're not appointing the library director, you're appointing the position of the library director, which she would act as that. If a new library director was appointed during this period, that individual would be a member of the screening committee. Does that make sense?
Yes, if we instead, one concern I have is that we haven't talked to any of these individuals about their willingness to serve. I mean, certainly an important role. They may very well be, they may have other obligations. If we were instead to say, in lieu of the library director and a public safety department head, could the motion be and 2 department heads, and then we can solicit applications from them?
Right, and then when you make the charge, I would, because the charge isn't being made here today, I would just, once you figure out who has availability and time to serve, I would just name the specific position.
Rather than the individual.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay. Does that make sense to others? I feel funny, you know, appointing Chief Burns or Chief Clark or Director Lannon without talking to them. So
That makes sense. Looking around at others. Chris?
Thanks, Karen. So I don't see the anyone from the school side represented in that at all. Can a member of the school committee not serve on this selection committee, or could somebody? Because I don't see anyone represented from that portion of town. Ivrea, I guess.
So from a legal perspective, a school committee member could serve. It's really a policy decision for this board to make.
Mark?
So, Chris, great question. I was playing with this back and forth, trying to figure out who it could be. And if we really had, someone with good tenure in the school system, I mean, if we had a superintendent who was there for a few years, that would be great. It's kind of all brand new here in terms of what's going on. And we have the resident issue as well. I kind of resigned myself to the notion of having Tom serve as the kind of part of an interviewing group, that we would want to make sure that the candidates that came through the screening committee would then spend some time with Tom and perhaps perhaps Jean from the town side, and Sharon definitely. That same kind of school side, and I'm a little uncomfortable having kind of a member of another an elected body not part of us as part of that group. I'm not sure it's not a short discussion in my view. It's a longer one.
School committee members could apply for resident positions as the library board of trustee members.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So Anne, then did you need to propose a friendly amendment to Mark's motion?
Could I make a friendly amendment to Mark's motion? Oh, the only other thing, sorry. I also would, as I mentioned before, be very interested in involving, and we would need to speak with her, but Sharon Engstrom, our town accountant, given her financial experience, Bob's financial experience, that very critical aspect of the town manager role. And I think the important perspective that Sharon has on that part of the town manager role. So how could we could not appoint her ex officio, correct? Because I don't believe she's a resident, but we could invite her to sit in, or in the same fashion as the superintendent, have some ability to interview candidates and or look at resumes. Could we invite her to participate in an executive session with us? Okay.
Absolutely. That's how you would do it. She could still have a voice in the process, but she just can't vote.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and to be clear, the superintendent's feedback was that he would love to replicate what his search mirrored, where he would interview the final candidates and give us some feedback. And I do think that's quite important. And to Mark's point, I think I'm going to guess the school committee had similar reservations because no select board members were invited to be part of that committee. It was just the town manager. But again, so we can see a parallel then. They had they included voice from the town side, and we would want to include voice from the school side. And the resident positions are completely wide open. So. Any more comments from board members? Chris?
Thanks, Karen. So I know to Mark's point, he mentioned about an elected official, but wouldn't the moderator fit the elected official portion of that as well? You mentioned that.
Yes, but I view that as more like a town meeting. And we're a number of us are town meeting members, right? And we're elected in that capacity. I was thinking more of kind of a board, library board of trustees, school committee, select board, RMLD commissioners.
I guess my thing with the school committee side is, or school in general, obviously Tom is brand new over there. So he, I would like his voice, but yes, he hasn't been there. But I don't know if it was put up to a school committee vote, or I know Chuck has been there for like a decade, right? I might be wrong on that, but I would like to see something from that side represented, but that's where I'm at.
Thank you, Chris. Okay. Are we ready to take a vote on the motion before us?
I didn't actually offer my friendly amendment. My friendly amendment would be to strike library director and public safety department head and replace that with 2 department heads to serve ex officio, such that we can reach out to those individuals, encourage them to indicate their interest should they so have it.
Could I have a second?
Second, but going to do a clarification. Your residents necessarily?
Yes. Oh.
To serve, they'll have to be voting members. They'll have to be residents. I do think we can hear from I certainly, I don't know if any department heads are watching now. I would certainly welcome hearing from any or all of you, regardless of whether you're a resident, in terms of your level of interest in participating in the process. I had mentioned Sharon as a result, do important role that the town manager plays, but certainly would welcome hearing from our department heads, their level of interest in participating in whatever fashion in this process.
So could we add some friendly elements to the friendly amendment? So you mentioned two department heads. Should we say resident department heads? And then the question would be, should it be up to 2 rather than 2? In other words, if we go through the process and we can't find department heads that are residents, more than 1, let's say, should it be up to 2 department heads that are residents as ex officio members? I see Chris says
that would it could potentially leave us with 6 members, or probably better. Can we have another? If 2 department heads are unwilling to serve, we would open it up to another resident position.
I see Chris's hand is up.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Go ahead.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, that was my point. If it ended up going 6, then yeah, it makes sense to do just another resident, because I would assume they're going to be the majority of the people applying.
Okay.
Also, just I think Alan would be a really, really excellent candidate, and agree that having the town moderator would add a really important voice to the screening committee, and the town meeting perspective is really helpful. But I do wonder if we just make it 3 residents at this point and invite Alan to apply, just to know what the applicant pool would look like. I think Alan had the wherewithal to join our meeting today and ask the request to be included, which was very, brings the town moderator role to the forefront. And certainly I feel like he would be an excellent addition to the screening committee, but I don't know if we want to commit to that now without seeing who the other applicants are.
So you're proposing 4 residents, so 2 select board members,
Three in lieu of town moderator plus 2 residents.
2 resident department heads, and 3 residents. Did I write 2, 3, 2? No. 2 select board members, 2 department head residents, 3 residents.
I was just
Yeah.
thinking of like allowing everyone sort of equal opportunity to make their pitch, which Alan did very capably today. A very strong pitch, no doubt.
Okay, Mark?
I'm actually less comfortable with that. I think that the moderator has a distinct role in the town, and I think it's a perspective that should be there. And I'm not as comfortable kind of suddenly growing the number of residents to potentially 4 and maybe more. It feels like we've lost our screening capability. We've turned it more into this kind of larger kind of voting thing. I think having 2 residents is right. The potential of 3, depending on how the department head structure works out. I think 3 is as many as we want. I'm remembering back to the last time through, we had essentially 2 residents as part of that committee.
Mhm.
One of them was a member of the community actually who was an HR professional, and I thought that was great. And the other member was a person with a very deep background in the community and actually very engaged with the senior population. And I thought that was a really good element as well. I think we're going to get into trouble of adding more and more residents. I kind of feel like moderators.
The idea was sort of like to have 3 instead of 2, and Alan could apply for one of those positions, was sort of my thinking, and then could ultimately end up with one of those positions. But I hear your.
Karen, a quick question
Sure, Carla?
before we vote. Thanks. Just to be clear, the way this is going with the 7, and is it, and so until the screening committee, selection committee is actually formed, all 5 of us are in the process until the committee is formed, correct?
I'm not sure how to respond to that because we have open meeting law concerns. So we're in a public session now, so we can all talk.
Right. What I mean by that is when the applications come in, that will be all 5 of us reviewing the applications, correct?
That's what we did last time. I would be proposing we do the same.
Okay, I kind of agree with Mark in the sense that, and I know Alan is a resident and our longstanding town moderator. So I just think the less voting we have to do as a board, the better, in my opinion.
Quick point of information. So once we've advertised for confidential resumes, it's my understanding only the search committee is going to be seeing those. Am I correct, Ivrea?
You mean the candidates for town manager position?
Yes.
So typically how it's generally done is that the applications come in and then the search or screening committee will review those applications, that the whole select board will not see those, and then those get pared down. However, that's something you can speak with the consultant about if the select board wants to review them. The issue is that discussing them amongst the whole board would have to happen during an open session and could potentially compromise the confidentiality of those documents.
So Carlo, does that clarify? I thought you were asking if we're all going to be kind of reviewing all the resumes. And I think the answer to that is no.
Yeah, no, I understood that part in Ivrea's letter yesterday. I know once we form the screening selection committee, there'll be 3 of us much less involved. No, I understand all that. My kind of point that I just made was that I'm trying to avoid as many, that's not the right word. I'm trying to have us all on board on who the selection committee is as much as we can possible. And I'd like to personally appoint the whole committee, this board, appoint the whole committee. Even if it's a couple residents, but it doesn't sound like the way that's going to go. But so this motion, I will not fully support this motion. I would rather us appoint all 7. I know we can't probably do it today because of time constraints, but that's what I would like to see is we appoint the selection screening committee. Thank you.
We will have to do that. The full board will have to vote on that.
No, I mean, without taking applicants, we pick the residents.
Oh,
That's what I meant. Sorry. I'm trying to avoid as much voting as possible.
Karen, you're muted.
Okay, sorry. I don't see how that would work. We have to get people to tell us they're interested. We can reach out to people and say, hey, by the way, it's out there. The town can help us do that, make people aware of it. And then, but people need to understand what we're asking for and then say, and raise their hands and apply. And then the full board would run through those applications and make an appointment. We could do it at our next meeting potentially, or we might need to schedule another one.
Chris has his hand up, Karen.
Chris.
Thanks, Aaron. I believe with what you just said is actually the way that it is. So what I guess I'm confused by Carla's question. We would be voting on all 7 people, including our own select board people, right? So I'm not sure. I guess I'm misconstruing what you're trying to say, Carla. I thought the 7 members that are going to be on this committee, all 7 of us are voting on all 7 people, regardless of who they are. That's correct, right?
all 5 of us are voting on
Yes.
the makeup.
On all
Correct.
7.
I think what Carlos is saying is he wants to just name the people right now and
Oh,
be
that
done with it.
seems impossible.
That's what I was hearing him to mean, but I could be mistaken.
Carla, do you want to clarify?
Yeah, Ann stated, I'm not eloquent like Ann can be, but yes, Ann is right. Thank you. I have a truck here. I'm going to be listening, but I have a truck here, so
I think a lot of us have to get going, actually.
Yeah.
So I think if I'm okay with moving forward with voting on Mark's motion, I made the friendly amendment about the public safety department head and library director and replacing them with 2 department heads. And I'm okay with, it sounds like saying 3 residents in lieu of 2 residents and town moderator was not a friendly amendment. So I'm okay with withdrawing that. We can move forward. I'm okay with moving forward, rather.
Okay, are we ready for a vote, members?
So point of clarification, if we take that vote and we said this is what the selection committee will be, the next thing would be to authorize requests for applicants.
Is that vote requiring? Do we need a motion to do that? But yes.
Yeah, and then set up ideally a deadline by which they'll do that and a meeting to vote on those people.
Right. So
Am I doing that right, Abria?
Yeah, you could do it all as one motion if you wanted to streamline the process. Just
Okay.
add it right now to your motion.
Is that okay, members? Can I add it to the motion? Okay, so the motion is going to be to create a selection committee comprised of 7 people, to include 2 members of the select board, the town moderator, 2 residents, up to 2 department heads that are residents as ex officio members, with the provision that if only 1 department head can meet that requirement, then we'd add a 3rd resident. And that we would authorize requests for people to apply for the position and to set a deadline of 10 days from today to receive those applications, and then to have a board meeting to vote on them to follow.
so moved. Could I have a second?
Second.
Excellent. Okay, board members, as I see you, Anne,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Carlo,
Yes.
thanks for hanging in there. I'm sorry we ran over. Chris,
Yes.
Karen, yes. So we are unanimous 5-0. Okay, great. We made some good progress today.
To avoid, another meeting, could we all plan for when we do have the scheduled meeting to hear applicants, that we all come with a question in mind, and then we would each have the opportunity to ask each applicant one question, and we would ask each applicant the same questions. We may find when we get together that we have some duplicative questions, but we could, I think, work it out in the meeting in advance of the interview.
So ask one question to.
Come prepared with the one question.
Board members, there's 5 of us. We want to ask consistent questions of all of the screening committee members that we need to appoint. So what Anne's suggesting, that we all have one question ready to go for our next meeting, or when we are able to interview these folks, and you have a backup question in case there are duplicates. So have one, understand you'll get, ask every candidate one question and decide what it is, and feel free to have a backup question. Is that what you're proposing, Anne?
I think so.
I offer a motion to adjourn.
I
Okay,
just had one other quick,
sure.
I could, thanks. For that, if they submit applications, so we'd interview them, say 10 days from now, the next board meeting. What if somebody doesn't show up? Should we, I mean, that just sounds, I'm just trying
It's
to,
like really important stuff. I mean, I think this isn't a normal committee. This is like, we need to get this done. Time is of the essence. If you can't make the time, we understand. This is probably the most important committee that anyone will ever serve on.
I agree. And that's why I think if someone makes the willingness to put an application in, and then, 9 out of 10 people show up, I'm just
We'll have our
advocating that
committee
everyone,
night.
what's
Yeah.
that?
We will only be, we were just gonna have to work with the applicants we have. So we've lost the moderator, but I also think that Mark made a motion to adjourn, and we probably weren't supposed to start debating other topics in the middle of it. But if that's the last comment, I would definitely entertain another attempt at a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it looks like Caitlin has a question.
I
Caitlin?
just have one real quick question. Are we just gonna have them apply with the normal volunteer application and have them put the town manager selection committee on the bottom? Okay.
Yeah, and give them the deadline, I think.
Thank you,
Yep.
Caitlin.
I would second Mark's motion.
Okay, any discussion?
Are we motion to adjourn? Sorry, yes.
Okay, Carla votes yes. Anne,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Chris,
Yeah.
and Karen, yes. Select board is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks, folks.
Have a great day.